In this video, we're going to be talking about the uses of the galvanic current in skincare issues. Before you can ever start on a client, you must discuss contraindications with them. So as they're filling out their client record card, you'll be asking questions like, please list the medications that you're on. If you see insulin, you know they're diabetic. If you see medicines you don't recognize, you need to make sure they're not for seizures. And the hormonal patch and or the IUD can be contraindicated. The galvanic negative will take an IUD and neutralize it, rendering it ineffective. So an unwanted pregnancy could result in that. If it's the hormonal patch, that's not an issue, okay? And then it can bring down your cycle. It can dilate, soften, and dilate the cervix. So if there's any possible way she could be pregnant, it could cause a miscarriage. And so the galvanic is not to be feared. Don't be afraid of it. It's just that these are the limitations that you need to know about so that you don't misuse the current. It is a vital part of skincare, and it's extremely important. When we talked about the skin and the structure of skin in Cosmo 20, you found that there's that basement membrane and nothing can get into the dermis without the use of this current. So if you want to get a hydrator into my skin, if you want any treatments to get into my skin, you have to use the galvanic current. Nothing penetrates without it. So your treatments are not nearly as effective, and you need to understand so you can use it wisely and safely. So once we've decided that yes, my client can use it, then I have to be sure I know the polarity on my machine. It's very easy for a machine to be hooked up backwards. The jacks go into the machine. You plug them in kind of like a computer, okay? And there's a positive and a negative. So if I put the positive in the positive and the negative in the negative, I'm good to go. But then what if somebody comes along and I don't know, took them out, laid them down, put them back in the other way, then I don't know if my machine is positive or negative. My machine just has the two jacks. Other machines have a button. And it's like, because it's a chemical current, it's like a battery. On your battery, you have a positive end that has the little protrusion, and you have the smooth side, which is negative. So when the button is pushed in on the machine, it should be set up for the electrode that you're using to be negative. When the button's released and the little thing is popped out, the electrode you're using then is positive, provided the machine is hooked up correctly. So how am I going to know that? Well, I'm going to take what they call the test for polarity. I have my pH papers here, okay? And when my machine is plugged in, now these papers have to be wet, and if I put the electrode on the paper, nothing happens right now. I have to have them both, okay? Both electrodes have to make contact. The papers have to be wet because the galvanic flows only in one direction. If one of these is not in contact, there's no flow of electricity from here to there. So the paper has to be wet. You make contact with both electrodes. Whichever one is positive, you'll see a red smear appear. The negative one will be almost purple in color. And then you'll know exactly what the polarity is of the tool that you're using. Now I have an inactive pole and an active pole. The client always holds the inactive electrode. It's wrapped in wet cotton, and she's either told to hold it in her hand or you place it under her shoulder. Then when you make contact with the skin, the electricity goes from this electrode to this one. But it goes through the entire body. The other electrode that I have is round, and it fits in small places like the corner of your nose. And most of the time in this area is where you have a lot of congestion and blackheads, and the roller doesn't cut it. It, it's not going to get into those little spots. So I'm going to use this one to get around my nose area, maybe up here if I have little blackheads around here, then this is the one I'm going to use. You, the technician, are holding the active electrode. Active because it's pushing. Remember that whatever the polarity, if this is negative, then my disincrustation lotion is negative. When two negative ions come together, they push apart. So negative solution, negative current, positive pull. So this electrode, because it's negative, is pushing my negative solution into my skin. Client is positive. When I reverse that, okay, and I reverse the plugs on my machine, and this is now positive, and this one is now negative, this is positive, my moisturizer is positive, so my positive moisturizer, my positive electrode is going to push positive through the skin down into the dermis. So now as we talk about how this process is accomplished, we get into, we have to have an understanding of the pH scale. You cannot separate electricity from chemistry. They go together, especially with this current. I put a little mini pH scale up here because I don't know if you've had chemistry yet, if you're in the middle of chemistry. I'm not sure where you are, but you need to understand that 7 on the pH scale is neutral. Anything below 7 is acidic. So acids harden and shrink. Anything above 7 is an alkali, and alkalis soften and swell. That's just a given. Now, the manufacturer is going to tell you what the pH of their product is. The original Dermalogica scaling fluid had a pH of 10. Okay, and the way a manufacturer determines that is they start with water that has a pH of 7. So if you can picture the 7 as a glass of water, then when I take a drop of my sodium hydroxide and put it in there, I elevate the pH to 8. That means 8 is 10 times more alkaline than 7. I put a little bit more in, I raise the pH to 9. 9 is 100 times more alkaline than 7. 10 is 1,000 times more alkaline than 7. And then 11 is 10,000 times more alkaline than 7. But my skin isn't 7. Either it's going to be a 6 for oily or a 4 for dry. So now I have to understand, what does this mean? My manufacturer said the pH is 10. My client has oily skin, which is 6, so I put the one under the 6. And then I go up in multiples of 10 because it's a logarithm. So 7 is 10 times more alkaline than 6. 8 is 100 times more alkaline than 6. 9 is 1,000 times more alkaline than 6. And 10 is 10,000 times more alkaline than 6. And you cannot exceed a 10,000 ratio to the skin or you will get chemical burns. Now, let's take it to the dry skin. Let's say my client has Amelia whiteheads and her skin has a pH of 4 because it's dry. Now I put the one under the 4. 5 is 10 times more alkaline than 4. And even though it's on the acid side of the street, it's going up. So the example that I use is driving your car. If your car is in neutral at 7 and you step on the gas, you aren't going anywhere. But as soon as you put it in drive and you move forward, anytime you're headed toward the 14, you're in drive. You're going forward. So even though 5 is still on the acid side, it's above 4, I'm headed toward the 14. Okay, so now I have to make sure I'm not exceeding my 10,000 ratio. So 6 is 100 times more alkaline than my dry skin at 4. And 7 is 1,000, and 8 is 10,000 times. One man's medicine is another man's poison. You cannot use the same product at the same pH on two different types of skin. You must understand how to factor the pH scale. And this can get really confusing and complicating. But my manufacturer is going to tell me the pH. Dermalogica has now changed and reduced their pH to 8 for this very reason. 8 is still 10,000 times more alkaline than 4, so you can't give anybody a chemical burn. Dermalogica is always in the safe zone. They're very sure that the products that they are sending out aren't going to cause client harm, just in case you didn't know this. But now my oily skinned client, okay, doesn't have the benefit that she needs for me to get the extractions going. It doesn't work that way. So it's okay for the dry skin, but now I have diluted the benefit for my oily skin. If I use baking soda as the other active ingredient, disincrustation lotion is either going to have sodium hydroxide and or baking soda. If it's baking soda, I can make that myself. Okay, I take a cup of water and I add a teaspoonful of baking soda and I get a pH of 8, which is fine for my dry skin, but it doesn't help my oily. But if I add more baking soda, remember, I'm going to take my pH papers, okay, and I'm going to take the paper, I'm going to take it out of here and I'm going to put it in the liquid, and it should turn, there's a pH of 10. Okay, so when I'm adjusting the pH and I'm making a product, I have the meter right here and my papers here. I take one of these papers out, okay, I put it in my product, and then I match it to whatever color it's going to turn. And that's how I know what the pH of my products are. Moisturizers, on the other hand, are acidic. They have a pH of about 6, and they're positively charged, so now I'm using my galvanic positive to push it in. That didn't bring my skin back down. For me to not experience breakout, I have to return the skin to as close a pH of 5 as I can get it. If you took this 6 all the way over to a 10, and you rinse it out with water, you bring her back down to a 9, okay, then I use my toner. That's not enough. I've got to bring her down, okay? I've got to get her down here. So the toner, my moisturizer, is going to be 6. That brings her down a little bit more, but then when I mist her face with the toner has to have a pH of 3. Because I need to keep bringing her down. I need to put my car in reverse now. I need to be headed toward the 0. So I'm over here, I put my car in reverse, and now I'm going 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. So if I have her at 8, because she's a 4, my water's going to bring me down to a 7-ish, my moisturizer down to a 6-ish, my toner still has to have a pH of 3 to get me down to 5. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. I have to know my chemistry. I have to understand active ingredients. I have to understand how it interacts with the pH scale so that I'm making sure I get everything done the way I want it to done. The way I want it done. Okay, this is super important because as I'm using the product, I'm pushing it into the dermis. So when I'm using galvanic negative, it's called anaphoresis. Anaphoresis is forcing a negative solution into the skin using the galvanic negative. When I'm putting the moisturizer on and I'm using positive, it's called cataphoresis. Cataphoresis is forcing a positively charged solution into the skin using the galvanic positive. And these questions are on your state board exam. Whether you're Cosmo or skincare, because you not knowing this can cause client harm. Always when I have completed my service, I have to make sure my client has a pH as close to 5 as I can get her. I have to make sure she is positively charged, because these two things create my acid balance, my acid mantle. Acid mantle should be about 5 because bacteria do not reproduce in an acid environment. That's one way the skin protects you from bacterial infections, is that it has a pH of around 5, which is acidic. I need to be positive. I need a pH of 5. And I need to do the lymph drainage massage, because this has stimulated blood and lymph. It has brought this up into the skin, up into my epidermis. And if I don't expel the carbon dioxide and cellular waste with my lymph drainage massage, then the bacteria and carbon dioxide and waste is going to come out through my skin, and I leave her prone to breakout. If I did a service that destroyed the beneficial bacteria that's on the surface, called the Langerhans and T cells, if I did a chemical exfoliant and I killed them, if I did a microderm and sucked them off and took them away, then they have to be replaced with a probiotic mask. So there's 4 things that need to be in place at the completion of your facial. pH 5, positive ionic charge, replace the beneficial bacteria, and do your lymph drainage. Nobody's going to pay you for a facial and you're causing them to break out. Now, this is just the overview of how to use the current. This is not a procedure per se, because in a procedure, after you do your consultation and you've determined it's okay, you do your cleansing routine. You choose your method of exfoliation. Then you do your disincrustation, which prepares the skin for extractions. That's the whole purpose of this, is to cause the pore to open and the hardened mass of sebum to melt, liquefy, and dissolve. Where did I write that? Melt, liquefy, and dissolve, okay, so that I can do extractions. And extractions can be done with my skin scrubber. My skin is already moist because I have my disincrustation lotion on it. And this, I can turn it on. Okay, and I don't think you can hear it, but you can see the light. And when I push it over here, it's on the negative side. I need to stay negative. And then I can come in here and I can do my extractions wherever I want to, but I must keep my blade moving. If I just hold it still, it can burn the skin. And it's not a burn that's, oh, that's hot, take it off. You don't realize that. It's more of a well, it burns the skin and it'll leave a patch. If they have pigmented skin, it can leave pigmentation behind. So you need to be careful and keep it moving. The other tool that you can use at home, that you can give her at home, is a handheld. Anytime you see the 4 magnets, you know you have galvanic current going on. Okay, so when you turn this machine on, it's also one of the dermal lights. I push the top button, is right in here, and it controls the amount of electrical current. So the more I push it, the more electricity is emitted through these, but I have to make contact. If I'm only on one, there's no current going through the body. It has to be at least 2. Then the bottom light changes the color, the bottom one changes the color of your light. So when we talk about light therapy, I'll bring this tool back so that you get a better idea. But remember that the galvanic current is for ana and cataphoresis. Pushing negative in, preparing for extractions, doing your extractions, cleansing, hydrating, using the galvanic positive as cataphoresis, and pushing that positive product into the skin, and then your toner for insurance to make sure you get that pH down as close to 5 as you can get it.